righty. Hello, everyone. This is our weekly um, Edgar Poe reading session. I am Jose Vega, congressional candidate running in the Bronx. And I want to thank you again for joining us. If this is your first time joining, this is something that we have been doing weekly for a long time now. I think we started this even since the last election too, so it's been quite a while actually that we've continued to do this, and as a result we've developed a steady stream of people who do tune in on a regular basis. And so for that I want to thank the people who are on regularly, and if you're new here, thank you for joining us. We have people on sometimes from Germany, London, Ireland, and other places in Europe, so I want to thank you again for coming on here. um, Last, and as always, before we actually go into the post story with Dennis Speed, what we do is we give a little bit of a briefing here. And today I'm actually going to pass off that responsibility to my friend Kynan Thistlethwaite, who has been doing a phenomenal job recently with both the Saturday Manhattan town halls as well as the Thursday night fireside chats with Lyndon LaRouche. And so what I'll do is I'll just bring him in here and he can brief all of you on what it is that he's been up to.
Can
So,
you hear me? Because you have the
yes, I
phone.
put it on the speaker.
Oh, well, wonderful. Well, thank you, Jose, for letting me brief your wonderful audience. I wanted to start off with a few observations. I think many people had seen yesterday's, I'm sorry, Wednesday's national TV address by President Donald Trump, where many were confused. Many of you may have been confused, you may have been baffled or outright outraged by his description of his wonderful accomplishments in office, how the economy is doing great, and how the main problem confronting the economy is the so-called illegal migrants that are entering the nation.
Right. Just get rid of all the migrants and everything will get better.
Right. And the thing that we know is that these involuntary migrations largely have been caused by 30 years of the Anglo American globalization policies inflicted largely in the global south, including the predatory hyperinflationary monetary policies and the resultant deindustrialization of the United States. Now, what we were expecting in that speech, I was expecting it, Jose was expecting that,
Yeah,
but
that's right.
was Trump's announcement of an invasion of Venezuela. If people didn't see this, Tucker Carlson, the former Fox News host and podcaster, one of the most largely viewed podcasters now in the United States, was on with Judge Andrew Napolitano the same day of Trump's national TV address. And he had said that, according to a congressional source who he did not name, that President Trump would declare war on Venezuela. That did not occur. We could list different reasons for why that didn't occur. Perhaps Tucker's own intervention saved us from another illegal, endless war. Perhaps it was the two votes in the House, one on the Wars Power resolution, which almost passed. It only failed by two votes. It was 211 to 213. Um, but regardless, we should note that this speech that Trump gave is given in a context of a failing NATO regime and failing West, really. And NATO is really dooming itself now by preventing a solution to a Ukraine war, which could be easily solved if all the interests of the parties, all the security interests of the parties involved were taken into account. Any sane military analyst, such as Scott Ritter, Ray McGovern, could tell you that Russia has already won the war. And despite hundreds of billions of dollars that have been given to a failing Volodymyr Zelensky regime, a lot of that money has been siphoned off, by the way, and that's a huge corruption scandal in the country now. Despite all this aid, they are losing the war. We see certain nations in Europe. This has been big news recently, but the European Union did not come to a consensus as to the matter of taking Russia's financial assets and using it to fund Ukraine. That failed. Certain outliers like Slovakia, Hungary, the Czech Republic were certainly contributing factors to that. But the so called unity of NATO against Russia, that's been shown to be a huge lie. And why does this relate to what's going on with Venezuela? Well, Europe has been generally silent on this issue. And this, like what we see in Ukraine, is yet another of these illegal regime change operations, which Trump, by the way, was elected by his base to stop, to never again launch such a war of conquest. But unlike Europe, one of the nations that has been warning Trump not to go into this futile war has been Russia. And I'll just read to you what was said this Wednesday by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in a meeting with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. He said, quote, regarding the behavior of the United States, namely its actions in the Caribbean, just about every country has expressed disapproval at the measures, except for the Europeans, who have chosen silence and discretion. Now, people may have seen also this interview with Belarusian President Lukashenko, who was interviewed by Greta, I'm losing her last name, but who's a reporter with Newsmax. And he was also very insistent that Trump, despite the fact that Lukashenko praises him for how he's been handling the situation in Ukraine, he's telling him, don't get involved in this war in Venezuela. There's no drug problem, a supposed drug problem, which Trump's neocon advisors are trying to inform him about. That doesn't exist. This is going to destroy your administration. So with that, I think what is the solution to Venezuela? What is the alternative policy instead of these endless wars that we've been involved in since the collapse of the Soviet Union? Well, I think this relates to what we're going to be talking about today with the real history of the American Revolution. But the Monroe Doctrine, which was authored by Secretary of State John Quincy Adams, who later became president, was not the basis for imperial interventions into the Western Hemisphere. It was actually an anti-colonial policy, which was meant to prevent Europe at the time from taking control of the Western Hemisphere, from overthrowing republics, newly formed republics that were being formed in South America. And John Quincy Adams had stated clearly that the United States, instead of searching for monsters to destroy, should be building a community of sovereign nation states. Now, I think it's that misunderstanding and that lack of recognition with the significance of John Quincy Adams' administration, which is you see the result of our policy today, of our foreign policy, which is not based on the American Constitution, not based on the Declaration of Independence, but based on the British takeover, hijacking of our real policy. It's that tradition of the real Monroe Doctrine, of John Quincy Adams, of Edgar Poe, which is why we read him, which will help us reshape our policy today. So I think I'll just end it there.
Okay, awesome. And thank you so much for coming in here and doing the briefing for today. That was very nice. Just a few housekeeping things on the campaign before I pass things off to Dennis as usual. This week was a pretty good week, I would say. I made a lot of phone calls. I spoke to a lot of you. It's no secret that what we are in the middle of right now is a fundraising drive. We are looking to raise $25,000 between now and Christmas. And a lot of you have chipped in towards that. That has been great. And I want to thank all of you again. We are still short from our goal. And so if you can donate Visit votevega.nyc. We have a goal of just $25,000 between now and Christmas, and a goal of $250,000 between now and the middle of next month, next January. So, with that being said, I am now going to bring in our friend Dennis Speed. Let's see. Are you there and can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I want to apologize for people for not being able to be seen, but certain medical problem that prevents that from being a good idea. So you can hear me clearly, Jose, right?
I think so. Give me a second. Keep talking.
Yeah, you're a bit choppy to me, but I'm able to hear you pretty clearly. Uh, so
You're good. Yeah, it's me, but you're good.
it is okay. Very good. So that way we have that. Yeah. Um, Well, what we'll do today is to, uh, we talk a bit about Poe, but we're going to pick up from something that we basically took up last week concerning, uh, well, two things. One, his death in Baltimore, in his death in 1849, let me say, which is suspicious. And secondly, the obituaries done around his death. We argued last week that Edgar Poe has been one of the more slandered figures in American history. And we talked about that and why that is so. And we referenced somebody by the name of Rufus Griswold. And we can put up a picture of him at some point, just if you want to know what he looked like. Rufus Griswold, that is, the person that was opposing Poe. But what I want to do is to just reference part of what was said in the obituary at the time, because it seems to, it is a story which, if true, reveals something very, very different about Poe and about what was happening with Poe, about who he was, what he did. So if we've got that first, okay, that's Rufus Griswold. So I'm going to read a portion of what Griswold said. And before I do that, I just want to be clear that what Griswold was asserting about Poe became pretty much the gospel about Poe's character. We're not going to go through that. I think a lot of people have heard things about Poe as an alcoholic. He was a drug addict. He was a pederast. He was bipolar. Many different things were said, and they were spread by Rufus Griswold. But there's a passage from from the obituary that he prepared for Poe that we will refer to now. And if you've got it there, please put it up on screen. If not, I would just read it. It's not that long. In 1825, Poe went to the Jefferson University at Charlottesville in Virginia, where he led a very dissipated life, the manners of his college being at that time extremely dissolute. Just saying it basically, he was always showing out. He took first honors, however, and went home greatly in debt. Mr. Allen refused to pay some of his debts, and he hastily quitted the country, left the United States on a chaotic expedition to join the Greeks, then struggling for liberty. So there was a liberation struggle going on in Greece at this time. It says Poe did not reach his original destination, however, but made his way to St. Petersburg in Russia, where he became involved in difficulties from which he was extricated by the late Mr. Henry Middleton, the American minister, meaning the American representative, diplomatic representative at that capital. Poe returned home in 1829 and immediately afterward entered the military academy at West Point. Okay. Now that's what Griswold says. Now, the reason that this is important is that this is contested by many different people. It's said that Poe did not go to Moscow, but Griswold, who was often slandering Poe, says that he did. And this is a contemporary account. So the issue is, was Poe in Europe? Did he go to, was he trying to get also to Greece? Did he go to Russia? And in fact, did the American ambassador to Russia, Henry Middleton, have to get him out of some difficulty? The reason that we are interested in this is because it would seem to indicate something very different about his character. And it's important that we try to get at this because we want to see, are we dealing with a poet? We're just dealing with a sort of a flighty, mercurial, unpredictable personality that happens to be talented and can write? Or are we dealing with somebody who has a much different relationship to the society and to the history of the United States? Let me know something before I continue. First of all, am I able to be heard clearly? And secondly, do you guys have any of the posters ready yet? Hello, I'm not able to hear anything. Can you text me at least and let me know if I can be heard? Okay, I can be heard. Okay, thank you for texting me, and I'll just continue. Okay, you're having technical issues on. Okay, let's say having technical issues on that side. Do you know, Jose, whether other people are able to hear me? Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you for that. So, okay, so I'm going to continue. Don't worry about it. We'll deal with the technical thing. People just have a little bit of an imagination, and I'll tell you why I'm getting at this whole story. What it is we're doing here. We're trying to establish something because I read something which was, I thought, very important about Poe and his academic career in Virginia at the university. And what I'll do, since we're having some problems on that end, is just try to see if I can refer to this because it may surprise you, may be interesting. I got this in December. Poe, first of all, was born in 1809. Okay, he's born January 19th, 1809. And what we're going to be discussing is Edgar Poe at the age of 17 and 18. Okay, that's what we're discussing. Now, remember what I just read to you said that even though Poe was supposedly a big cut up and or was doing gambling and other things, which he was doing these things, that he somehow took honors in his subjects. Now, there were basically two subjects that he studied in great depth at the university. One was ancient languages. That meant Greek and Latin. And the other were contemporary languages. And that was French, German, Italian, and Spanish. But there was something interesting. When they gave examinations at the University of Virginia, here were the people who were there. They did a thing called public examinations. So in other words, instead of thinking about examinations the way you and I probably went through them, think about it as though there's like a day at the university and they invite people in to watch you take your examinations, which is pretty out there. But that's what happened. And I want to tell you who was in the audience in December of 1826 when Poe took his his oral examinations on Latin and Greek and all this stuff. James Madison, who had been president of the United States for 2 terms. James Monroe, okay, who was also a president of the United States for 2 terms. And then 2 other individuals whom people can look up and see who they were. Joseph Cabell, Cabell. Somebody might look that up for me. And John Hartwell Cocke, Cocke. I don't know who that was. So now James Madison was the rector of the university. And so they were there in December of 1826 when Poe took his examinations. Now think about that, right? This is public examinations to see how well the students were doing. The reason for this was that there was a big promotion going on of this university. Both of these men, of course, Madison and Monroe, were from Virginia. They were part of what some people used to call the Virginia dynasty, which was that of the first 5 presidents of the United States, 4 of them were from Virginia. Washington was first, followed by Adams, who was from Massachusetts, followed by Jefferson, who was Virginia, followed by Madison, who was from Virginia, and followed by Monroe, who was from Virginia. And so at this time in 1826, John Quincy Adams had become president. John Quincy Adams was the son of John Adams. So the only 2 states that had been represented in the presidency of the United States from Washington's presidency until this moment were from either Massachusetts or Virginia. Okay, so if we can put up the first one of those posters, let's do that. I guess that the first one is yes. Well, okay, so this one is not the first, but it's okay. Because what I want to do is say something about the character of Poe, because people might like that to be, well, he's 17 years old. So the idea is, what was he doing and what was he actually like? So this, can one of you guys read that from there, or do I have to read everything, which I will, but are you able to? I'm still not able to hear you. I take it I just go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I heard you.
There we go. All right.
Okay,
sure.
Great. So why don't you just read this one, which will get us started.
Poe, 1826. Denying the account of a fellow student. Thomas Good Tucker that he and Poe were roommates and had a fight. Miles George wrote E.V. Valentine, 18 May 1880. Poe and myself were at no time roommates, therefore he did not leave me or I him. Poe roomed on the west side of the lawn, I on the east. He afterwards moved to the western range. I was often in both rooms and recall the many happy hours spent therein. Of the pugilistic combat so minutely described, I have some recollection. It was a boyish freak or frolic, and both fight and the feeling in which it originated were by consent buried in oblivion, never again to be revived. Poe, as has been said, was fond of quoting poetic authors and reading poetic productions of his own, with which his friends were delighted and entertained. Then suddenly a change would come over him, and he would, with a piece of charcoal, evince his versatile genius by sketching upon the walls of his dormitory whimsical, fanciful, and grotesque figures, with so much artistic skill as to leave us in doubt whether Poe in future life would be painter or poet. He was very excitable and restless, at times wayward, melancholic. Sorry, I'm just trying to find my
Sure.
place here. Melancholic and morose, but again in his better moods, frolicsome, full of fun, and most attractive and agreeable companion.
All right. So what we are hearing here is several things. That Poe used to fight. He used to recite poetry. Some of the poetry he had written. Some of the poetry was poetry he simply quoted that he liked and he wanted people to hear. But then he'd start drawing on the walls, and he would, as is indicated here, he apparently was a pretty good artist. But he also was excitable, restless, so forth and so on. Sounds like he was 17 years old, frankly, but at least an incipient. Am I back?
There we go. Yes, at least an incipient was the last thing we heard.
Yeah, an incipient genius. Okay, now let's go to something which the next one tells us a bit about what he took out of the library. Can you just put that one up? Yeah.
Okay.
I'll just read that one. Poe withdraws from the library the first and second volumes of George. This is John Marshall, the first head of the Supreme Court, who wrote this Life of George Washington. So Poe had withdrawn the first and second volumes, and then and that's in August of 1826. And then in November, he withdraws 2 volumes of something called Nicholas Goen Dwief's Nature Displayed in Her Mode of Teaching Language to Man. Now, for everybody that's listening, here's what it is we're about tonight. And I want that people may volunteer to assist in what I'm about to talk about. Original research requires to dive in and get original sources. And often what you'll find if you try to do this is that you'll find that there are these books or other things that you'll run across which tell you something very interesting about not only the person that checked the books out of a library, but about the topics themselves and how the topics were taught. Think about this title: Nature Displayed in Her Mode of Teaching Language to Man. So what does that even mean? And it's something that I'd like that someone might volunteer to take a look at. See if you can find the book. Let us know in the chat, or let us know otherwise as you wish. Let's go to the next poster, and please read that one off. I think this is going to be clear. This one is about Poe and a meeting that he had with someone by the name of Peter Pindar Pease. Real name. I'd look the guy up. So if you could read that off.
James Albert Clark described Poe as a pretty wild young man who took much interest in athletic sports. And this was quoted in Richmond newspaper, 29th of November, 1885. And then May of 1826, Poe meets Peter Pindar Pease. Quote, as a boy old, Pease was apprenticed to an itinerant saddler, Herman Tucker by name, and shortly before the early 30s arrived at Charlottesville, Virginia, where the worthy harness maker opened the shop and my great-uncle Pease became his assistant. Trade was pretty brisk, and soon the little shop expanded into a sort of curio store filled with second-hand articles, including a library which had fallen under the auctioneer's hammer in order to satisfy a plantation debt, and so came into the possession of Tucker. Among these books was a rare edition of Hogarth's prints, and this work the young assistant resolved to purchase on the installment plan from his employer. 2 small payments had been made when Poe, then attending the college there, happened into the shop one day, noticed the book, and desired to buy it. Upon Tucker's telling Poe that his clerk was attempting to purchase the work out of his meager earnings, the poet asked to be made known to my great-uncle, and thus their acquaintance began. Poe immediately invited young Peter up to his room, asking him to bring the Hogarth along with him that they might look it over together, and the invitation was accepted. Next evening, the call was made, and after some parley, Poe suggested that they gamble for the book, agreeing to pay Peter the full price, which Tucker asked in case he lost. If Peter lost, he was to continue paying off the debt to Tucker, and Poe was to keep the Hogarth. My great-uncle had been brought up to fear the devil, and all his works with Calvinistic severity, but he resolved to take the chance of getting the book for nothing. So the dice were thrown. Poe lost and promptly paid over the money. Whatever became of the Hogarth, I do not know. It is certainly not in the Pease family library, and Peter probably sold it. This incident occurred sometime in May of 1826, as nearly as the old deacon remembers it.
Okay. So we know that Poe was a gambler. We know that he gambled for books. We know that even though he didn't seem to have money and often didn't have money at all, somehow he paid the entire sum for this book. So, so we know several things here. We also know from the earlier part of that, which was actually from a comment from somebody else, that he apparently was interested in athletics. I don't know how good an athlete he was, but he had this interest. So this is a guy who's a poet. He's an artist. He has an interest in athletics. He's clearly also a gambler. He's also involved in fights. He's 17 years old, and we know that he took these examinations at the end of December of 1826. And I didn't say this before, but he excelled in those examinations, particularly in the subject of Latin, but in the others as well. And that we also know he shortly thereafter left the university in a state of poverty because Allen did not give him money. John Allen, his foster father. For people who may never have not been on any of our earlier classes, Poe's parents had died when he was a very young boy. Both of them were actors. He had been born in Boston. The parents actually were from Baltimore, but they settled for a period of time in Richmond. And that's kind of, that's where he initially grew up until they both died. In his early life. He then became a kind of a ward. He was adopted by John Allen and Frances Allen. Frances Allen was the wife who wanted to adopt him. He lived for 5 years in England because John Allen had gone there as part of his business. And I think that was at the age, Poe was approximately 7 years old, I think, when they went there. And there were not big problems with John Allen originally at that point. Part of the origin of those problems between Poe and his stepfather was that Mrs. Allen was not capable of having children, and this caused quite a tension between her and her husband. And the husband had several children. Despite that, he didn't let that stop him. And this caused Poe to call him out at a bit later in life. Mrs. Allen was dead by that time, although there was even a confrontation, which did involve her presence as well. So just wanted that to be clear about the earlier part. What I'd like to do now is introduce one of the poems that Poe had written. This is 1826, and he publishes poems, a book of poems, the next year in 1827. Now, before I get to that, do you have one other long quote there, Jose?
Checking. Yeah. Let's see here.
Yeah, that's the one. See if you've got the whole thing there, because this is important because it says something. It takes up this problem, a problem that Poe ran into during 1827.
Okay. I can read this here.
Okay, great. And then tell Kynan he should get the poem ready, because then we're going to go to that right from here.
Okay. In July of the same year, Young Pease separated from his employer and returned to New England,
This is
settling
1826, just so everybody's clear. Go ahead.
settling in Boston, where he was again to meet Poe, though under vastly different circumstances. Poe left the university in December of 1826 and, breaking with his foster father, Mr. Allen, started out to seek his fortune, full of hopes and with supreme confidence in his genius, but knowing absolutely nothing of the world. It was while unloading a dray of hides on the waterfront one mustering March afternoon that my great uncle recognized in a pale, rather stoop shouldered clerk emerging from a mercantile house hard by, his former acquaintance who had diced with him unsuccessfully in Virginia a year before. He was about to hail Poe with the latter, catching sight of him, turned away and hastily disappeared around the corner. Thinking that Poe did not care to renew the friendship, Pease returned to his work. But when he had finished and was starting homeward, there was Poe waiting for him some distance down the street. He was very shabbily apparelled. Pease hailed him, but Poe hurriedly pushed him into an alleyway and begged him not to speak his name aloud, giving for his reasons that, quote, he had left home to seek his fortune, and until he had hit it hard, he preferred to remain incognito. As my great uncle recounted it to Judge Pease, he, Poe, told me that he had clerked for 2 months in a wholesale merchandise house on the waterfront at a very small salary, the most of which he had been too proud to ask for, and his employer, taking advantage of this pride and being a man of brutal and unscrupulous character, the boy was easily done out of most of the money which he had earned. His landlady, too, was a woman of no attainments and had no patience with a boarder who sat up nights writing on paper which he could not afterwards sell. She soon turned him into the street. He then tried literary work, but failed to obtain employment of any of the large journals. Finally, he secured work in the office of an obscure paper as market reporter. But the proprietor being a man of shady reputation, the office soon got into debt. And soon after Poe joined it, the paper stopped publication. He then told me that he was resolved to enlist in the army, for his resources were utterly exhausted and he was determined not to write to former friends for help. I believe he remained in Boston 7 months altogether. As is well known, Poe did enlist in the army in May of 1827 and served for 2 years.
Okay, so that brings us into the year 1827. And at the end of that year, he publishes a group of poems. So he's basically 18 years old, and he's written some poems, and they weren't all written in 1 year. They obviously were being written, and those would have been some of the poems that people heard when he would be at the university, and whether he was fighting or he was gambling or he was drinking or whether he was doing something athletically or whether he was drawing on the wall, he was writing. And so there's a book of poems. The book is called Tamerlane and Other Poems. Tamerlane being one of the long poems that he writes at this time. What we want to do is just introduce one poem and then leave some time for just discussion of what people have heard. And the reason for this is that there are several areas of investigation that I can say something about when we, after the poem and after we get a few comments. So, Kynan, if you're there and you can do something with that, with the poem we suggested.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, you're clear.
Okay. So this is, I'm sorry, remind me of the title again, Dennis. I don't have the title.
A Dream.
Yes, this is A Dream, published in Tamerlane and Other Poems. A wildered being from my birth, my spirit spurned control. But now, abroad on the wide earth, where wanderest thou, my soul? In visions of the dark night I have dreamed of joy departed, but a waking dream of life and light hath left me broken hearted. And what is not a dream by day to him whose eyes are cast on things around him with a ray turned back upon the past? That holy dream, that holy dream, while all the world were chiding, hath cheered me as a lovely beam, a lonely spirit guiding. What though that light through misty night so dimly shone afar? What could there be more purely bright and truth's day star?
Okay, now I want you to do it again because people are just hearing it for the first time. They can at least hear it a second time. And so please go ahead.
Okay. A wildered being from my birth, my spirit spurned control. But now, abroad on the wide earth, where wanderest thou, my soul? In visions of the dark night, I have dreamed of joy departed, but a waking dream of life and light hath left me broken hearted. And what is not a dream by day to him whose eyes are cast on things around him with a ray turned back upon the past? That holy dream, that holy dream, while all the world were chiding, hath cheered me as a lovely beam, a lonely spirit guiding. What though that light, through misty night, so dimly shone afar? What could there be more purely bright and truth's day star?
What we do, we can post that so people can see it. One of the reasons that we need to post that, by the way, is if you look this poem up, you will not see the first stanza. The reason you won't see it is because, well, I have an edition, which is the edition as they appeared when they first were actually printed. And we always do a little editorial comment about this, that people all have to know that many of Poe's writings, and this may be increasingly true of others, are altered as you see them on the internet. Now, that's not only because they're being altered because they're on the internet. Sometimes they're also altered in the editions that you get of Poe. And while it's true that that sometimes happens to other authors, in the case of Poe, it happens a whole lot. So that people don't get to read what he actually wrote, they read variations or edited versions of it and never get the actual impact of what he wanted to say and how he wanted it said. Okay, I guess this is one of the additions. Right, this shows what we're talking about. So, and then maybe what you can do is you can put up the poster version of that. Okay. So let's maybe take a minute here and just ask, because I don't know who else you have there because I can't see you guys. If there's anybody else in the office, any questions or any comments. So let's just take where are we so far? Are there any questions for what we've done so far? Because there's several matters that I think should be questioned, and I'm going to ask people to do a few things. Yeah, there you go. Somebody just wrote that their edition starts in the vision of the dark nights. Okay, and we started very differently. Kind of just say that other. Oh no, I'll do it. I've got it. And by the way, it said a wilder being from my birth, my spirit spurned control. But now, abroad on the wide earth, where wanderest thou, my soul? So he's posing something there that he's glad that he's free, but the question is, where is he? I'll just leave that. So, any comments, questions?
There's one I got sent to me, which is about where you're getting these sources from. If there's a way in which we can make it available for people after the class so they can investigate this further.
The answer is yes, I can do that. All of the stuff that we're quoting is, internet available. Okay, and there are about 4 or 5 different locations. Sometimes they're indicated in those little posters, and sometimes they aren't. But what we can do is make that available right afterwards. I'll pose one thing for people, which I'd like somebody to do, is to look up Henry Middleton. You're going to find some interesting things if you look up the Middleton family, because that's what they call the founding fathers as slave owners. That's a good one to look. That's South Carolina, and South Carolina was Charleston, by the way, South Carolina. Because that is the, shall we say, spiritual center of the Confederacy and the Confederacy movement of 1861, the one that essentially started the war. That's where it started. As some of you know, it's General P.T. Beauregard, who started the war by firing on Fort Sumter down in Charleston. And I only note that just because it's useful, to look at the background of some of these people. Matter of fact, Jose, did I send you any other posters concerning Peter Pindar Pease? I'm not sure if I did or I didn't.
Let's see. If it comes up on the screen, it's because yes.
Okay, because there's something interesting about this guy that Poe loses the bet to, and also the book itself. If you don't have it, we can take it up next week.
I don't think so.
Okay, don't worry about it. But let's put it this way: he went on. That person, Peter Pindar Pease, was from Vermont originally, and what he did in 1833, I think it was. So I'm not sure exactly when he was born, but he was one of the first settlers of Oberlin, Ohio, where the college was created. He didn't found the college, but he was there. He built the first cabin in Oberlin, Ohio, and was a deacon out there, and an abolitionist big time as well. So just to know, there's other history to some of the people that we're even talking about tonight. So let me just ask you guys, either you, Jose or Kynan, if there's anything that you guys have or anybody else has.
I'm just looking at the comments here. No, so far, I mean, I can just offer some of my reflections if that's okay too.
Yeah, sure. Whatever.
First of all, just kind of knowing this sort of early history of Poe, I think is already pretty important, because there's a sort of cloud of mysticism that surrounds Edgar Poe's life. I think, for one, it's just important for people to know that Poe went through the same kinds of struggles that we all did, or we all do. Guy was struggling too. He's like, hey, I might need to go into the army. And he also wanted to pursue his passion, right? Why isn't a biography? Is there like a biography of Poe that you would recommend to people to read?
Well, no, what I'm recommending that people do, which is what we're doing here, see, is it's pretty obvious in look at, I mean, we're not going to digress, but let's just take Trump. Now, he's talking about some Trump, what's it called? The Trump corollary to Roosevelt's corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. Now, I'm not going to get into a big thing about this right now, but the Monroe Doctrine was actually written by John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams, some of you know, you can look at this from the movie The Amistad. He was the one that defended the enslaved people that took over the ship The Amistad in a famous trial, which essentially created uh, was the beginning of a reversal in the United States. Though there had been other people who had been abolitionists before, and there have been a lot of documents written by particularly Black abolitionists and so forth much earlier in the history of the country. The Amistad case, which Quincy Adams took after he was president, and he had operated also in the Congress for a long time, essentially established the fundamental argument that the Africans, and these were actually people who were being brought into slavery, that the Africans were free men. And it created a great consternation in the United States. So I reference this because John Quincy Adams wrote what people call the Monroe Doctrine. He was Secretary of State. And it was under James Monroe that the Monroe Doctrine was then adopted. The Monroe Doctrine was adopted to defend the then emerging nations of South America against British military incursions against those countries at a time when the United States did not have any kind of a navy that could compare to the British Navy. That is, it was not actually capable of doing or patrolling the seas or anything like that, but it wanted to express solidarity with the nations of South and Central America in their attempts to liberate themselves from various forms of colonialism. That's what it was. So it was exactly the opposite of what it has become associated with. The content is the opposite. However, when Theodore Roosevelt was president, he had a corollary he wrote, which began to justify the kind of assertions and activity that we now see. I don't want to go into it very much. It is itself a useful investigation. Now, why do I bring this up? Well, because here's this person, Edgar Poe. Obviously, there's a lot that's very interesting. Are there people that write decently about him? Yeah, you can find some good biographical material, but I think we should reconstruct it from the standpoint of trying to get inside of his head between, let's say, the ages of, we're going to say 15, 16, 17, because he's writing these poems and into 18. He doesn't write them all in 1 year. He's obviously doing drafts. He's trying stuff out on friends. He's doing the kind of thing that you might associate, by the way, with people who wrote songs in the 1950s, 60s, 70s. People that do things in the rap field. It's the same thing. That is, what he's doing is he's trying out material. And he's writing, obviously, in whatever is the spare time he has. But then again, he's got this fight going with his stepfather, and it's not going well. And what he's trying to do, apparently, is use his genius to get somewhere. Now, here's something. I asked about these people that were at his final exams. We know that James Monroe and James Madison were two presidents of the United States, and they were there. Did anybody look up these other guys? One was named Cabell, and the other one, I forgot what I don't have it right in front of me. Let me see. Maybe I can find them here. I think I found the examination start at the university. Minutes of the Board of Visitors. Okay. Yes. Okay. I found it. Joseph Cabell, Cabell. Who is that? And John Hartwell Cock. John Hartwell Cocke. Who were those people? Because why you want to know? Because see, if he does these examinations and they're there and they see what he does and he excels, and then he ends up leaving the school because he has no money, like that same month. and then goes up to Boston where, he, he's seen by Pease, and he tells the story that we all heard. Is it possible that some of these people got in touch with him? Is it possible that he got in touch with some of these people? Then to think about him going into the army, into the military in May of 1827. So we know that apparently Middleton says something there about, when he was in St. Petersburg. Now he was trying to get to Greece, but he goes to St. Petersburg. So first of all, did any of this happen is the first thing. So somebody would have to look at Middleton's time in Russia. Can you still hear me? I don't know.
Yeah, someone have to look at Middleton's time in Russia.
Okay, yeah. He was there for 10 years. Middleton was the ambassador to Russia for 10 years. I think he was the longest serving ambassador. And by the way, John Quincy Adams had been ambassador just before Middleton. I think he was there for 7 years. Quincy Adams first, and then Middleton was there for 10 years. So, so the question is, did any of these people direct Poe? It's said that when he was at West Point, he requested a letter from Sylvanus there, but this is not the period of West Point when Poe is in the military. This is earlier, and so there's some questions here that one should try to figure out. What's the exact chronology? And those are some of the things that come to mind for me. Then, of course, there's just what he wrote, like looking at the poems that he wrote at the age of 18, and then maybe comparing them to some of the stuff he wrote later. There might be some interest there. So those are just some of the areas of interest. And I'd be interested if anybody would like to volunteer for any of those things, and then we could be in touch. And what we can do is put into, because we're up on time, I think right now, we can put into the chat the different references for the documents that we did quote. But it'd be good to get some people that would step up to do some of this.
Yeah, absolutely. People can write into the campaign voteVega.nyc. There's an email there, or they can contact me directly by reaching out to me on my various social media, as some of you have done before. That's one way in which you can get involved too. So, yeah. Just ways for people to contact me. And then afterwards, too, we'll make sure that it's available on the comment section of these videos that people can get the links. Somebody had asked if their sources that Dennis had provided will be available afterwards. Yes, they will be.
Okay, so thank you very much, Jose. Is there anything else to say in closing?
No, just want to further reiterate, of course, our goal, which is to raise $25,000 between now and Christmas, and $250,000 between now and the end or the middle of January. And if you want to help us, if you've enjoyed what you heard here, if you enjoy tuning in every Friday to Dennis Speed, and you are a U.S. citizen or permanent resident with green card, please donate at votevega.nyc. And just because we won't be meeting before Christmas, I wish to wish people a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever people celebrate. I want to wish you all well in it, and I hope that it goes well for all of you. So that's where I'll end it, Dennis. And I think we just close out here. So thank you all. I apologize for the technical difficulties, but I promise you it was well worth it, what we were doing beforehand. And just want to thank you all again. So with that, good night, everyone.